No, this show up. How are you? Thank you for coming. So he's doing the survey on behalf of Breakers, but if you want to sit on one of these. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so my name is Manny Gonzalez. I'm the Parks and Recreation Director. And I wanted to begin with a little bit of a recap from our previous meetings. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And if you don't mind, Daniela, could you switch to the PowerPoint? We discovered that when the PowerPoint is up, you can't see the speakers. And so the folks at home, we want to make sure they know who's speaking when we get to that point. So I wanted to start off by reviewing some of the dates. So if you can scroll. So review the dates for the meetings because we had to make a little bit of an adjustment to the remaining dates. I also wanted to share that if you haven't had a chance to take a look, the facility revision packet process is a page on the website under the sports section, and that has a schedule of the meetings as well as the recordings of previous meetings and a number of documents, field allocation documents from several cities throughout San Diego as well as the state, and actually a few. Orange County is the Orange County in Florida, so some places outside of San Diego as reference material. So our first meeting, we met and we discussed whether Oceanside should reinstitute the Athletic Federation or develop a sports council, including membership requirements and its role. And then the second topic was to determine what percentage of residents for a group would be considered, for a group to be considered a resident group. And so what we've asked is for groups to fill out a survey and let us know where your group stands on those two issues. And for today's meeting, our topics are to determine whether Oceanside should continue to have 2 field allocation periods, or if the department should have 3 or 4 allocation, what works best for the community. And then the second topic is to determine whether priority should be given to programs during their traditional season and what that would mean in terms of what those seasons would be. So we'll talk about it today, and then we'll ask for your feedback at the beginning of the third meeting with respect to that topic. The third meeting on March 21st will be to determine how the city of Oceanside should prioritize long-term or long-time users and new users, including how we allocate new facilities. And that'll become increasingly important with the development of Park Site 1, as well as the new joint use where we'll have access to additional fields. So we'll want your feedback on how we make that happen. And then the second topic will be to determine if the user group classifications that were developed during the standing committee meetings should be the baseline for the new classification. So one of the pieces of the facility rental packet is the facility or the user group guide. And so we'll want your feedback on whether that document that was presented by the standing committee should be the starting point. Meeting 4 will be on April 11th, and that topic is to determine the revised user group classifications. And our hope, or my hope, is that with those 4 meetings, we'll get to a point where we can have the information needed to refine the facility rental packet, including the user group classifications, and take that back to the standing committee in May, and then to the full Parks and Recreation. No, excuse me. Oh, my timeline's a little messed up, but to the standing committee, then the Parks and Recreation Commission, and then finally to City Council for approval. So I apologize. I don't recall the timeline off of the top of my head, but the intent is to oh, and I messed up the dates too. I said April 11th. The last meeting is on May 13th. So that was an additional adjustment. I wanted to reiterate the important collaborative work that was developed during the standing committee workshops during the fall. I know some of you were able to attend. And during those meetings, we developed a vision statement, which is to enhance and strengthen the Oceanside community by consistently serving each community member with absolute fairness and transparency. And the groups also developed 3 values, and those were fairness, community, and transparency. And so those are kind of the starting point for the new document. And I want everybody to kind of keep those in mind as we move forward. Okay, so currently there are 2 field allocation periods in the city of Oceanside. The spring season is from January 1 to June 30th, and the applications are accepted from October 1st. I'm sorry, Daniela, do you mind correcting me if you know? The spring season is from January 1 to June 30th, and applications are accepted from October 1st to November 30th. The fall season is from July 1 to December 31st, and applications are accepted from April 1st to May 31st. Most of our multipurpose fields are closed for the entire month of December for rust and maintenance. And then again, from June 1 to approximately August 15th, our Public Works Department has put together a breakdown of the type of maintenance that is performed each month. And this is available on the website. So you can take a look at how often the fields are aerified, how often the fields are aerified, how often they are fertilized, and when we would be doing any kind of reseeding projects. The city could adjust the number of allocations that we do annually, but once the allocation occurs, the facilities that remain unused become available on a first come, first served basis. So anybody who wants to permit a field after the allocation has occurred can actually go on the website and look at all of our park inventory and determine when a field or asset is available for rent. So once that allocation happens, it opens up. One thing I want to address is potential consequences for requesting fields and leaving them, or I keep saying fields, but I'm talking about facilities too. So it might be a gym, might be a court, but consequences for leaving them vacant. And I know the folks that have been participating in this group do a very good job of letting us know when a field is no longer needed. But one of the things that I think is really critical is that we kind of institutionalize that. I think everybody knows that you can't sublease a field. If that field is no longer needed, it should be returned to the city and open for anybody to use. I've come from other organizations where groups kind of reserve fields to keep other groups from having access to those fields, and we want to make sure that that's not happening. Part of that piece, I think, is there's kind of the sense of historical need, and I know that sometimes need fluctuates from one year to the next, and so I think it's important that we talk about what happens if I don't need fields this year, but next year I do, and will giving those fields back impact me for future years if I see kind of a growth in participation. So I want to ask Daniela to take down the PowerPoint and then open up the conversation about allocations. This is a conversational meeting, so I think if you could just identify your name and organization before you speak so that folks at home or watching the recording know who you are, that would be appreciated. But this is an opportunity to have an open dialogue. And you've got a mic in front of you. If you could make sure that it's turned on so people at home on the Zoom can hear you. And if you need help in that. Okay, so.
Yeah, Manny, Glenn Hinton here, Coastal Academy High School. As far as the field allocation periods for us, since we follow the CIF schedule, which is a fall, winter, spring, I mean, we can adjust anything, but with the 2 periods, specifically our winter season crosses from November to February. So if we put in a allocation, for November, December, I know the fields are closed for certain things, but then we have to go back and do it again for the remainder of that season. I mean, for us, it would be helpful if there was maybe one more in there that included the winter season.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Hi, Frank Zimmerman for Oceanside Breakers. I think it works well, but I do definitely agree that seasons will cross and usage will sometimes be made difficult. I don't think it's fairly standard in my 29 years. Both the high school, the school district and the city have kind of done the same kind of calendar thing. So I don't think that's broken. I think some of the other pieces we've talked about over the course of this process with the standing committee have been pointed out, but I don't know that the calendar is an issue.
Anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this? Okay, thank you for your feedback. And like I said, the process will be that next month when we meet for the 3rd meeting, we'll ask you to formally provide that feedback. Okay, Daniela, can you shoot it to the PowerPoint? Okay, so one of the things that we've encountered, I think, in the past 20 years is just an explosion in terms of the number of youth and adult sports organizations that use and demand municipal fields, courts, swimming pools, facilities all over the country. This was exacerbated by COVID-19. So during that time when really the ability to use outdoor spaces was critical. There was increased demand on our fields and assets, and the other thing that has really changed over time is the time period for a particular sport, whereas 20 years ago was defined in a time of year, a specified time of year. Increasingly, particular sports are expanding to a year-round program, and so whereas there may not have been a need to identify peak seasons, increasingly that need may exist. So the current facility rental packet does not actually address a priority season for each sport. And the question to talk about today is whether that should be considered in the allocation process. One of the cautions that I will provide is to question the intended use of that or the intent of that priority. And I'll give you an example. When you look at lacrosse, high school season is during the spring, but the peak season for lacrosse is really in the fall through December. So the question becomes, is priority intended for the high school lacrosse or for the youth lacrosse? And that's what I want you to think about as we discuss these. If you had a chance to look at the document, and Daniela, you can go ahead and take down the PowerPoint, please. I'm going to share what some of the other cities do. So the city of Anaheim, from February to July, has baseball, softball, basketball, and tennis. From August to January, they have football, soccer, basketball, and tennis. The city of Carlsbad, from February to July, has baseball, softball, and lacrosse. And then from August to January has soccer and football. The city of Chino does January to June, baseball and softball. From July to December, football and soccer. The city of Manhattan Beach allows each group to identify what their peak season is. The city of Redlands in the spring does baseball and softball, and in the fall does soccer and football. The city of San Marcos from February to July does baseball, softball, and lacrosse. From August to January does soccer and football. The city of Upland from January to July does baseball, softball, soccer, and football. And from August to December does baseball, softball, and soccer. And then the county of San Diego from February 15th to June does baseball and softball. And then from August 15th to December does football and soccer. And they have what they identify as shoulder periods. So basically from January 1st to February 15th, and then from July 1st to August 15th. Those are, I guess, undefined peak periods. What you will see, or what you've probably heard, is that there's quite a few sports that are missing in terms of priorities. So I wanted to share the city of San Diego's for baseball is from February to July. For basketball is from January to May. For December to May. Football is August to December. Lacrosse is February to July. Soccer is August to December. There's two soccers. My apologies. Soccer is August to December. Softball is February to July. Rugby is December to May. And then there's also priorities for adult sports. Adult sports being in the evenings, and having priority on the evenings. But those are from March to December for baseball. For basketball, it's January through February and May through August, and then November through December. For football, it's August to December. Lacrosse, it's March to December. Soccer is March to December. Softball is March to December. Rugby is December to May. And then volleyball is from September to December. So San Diego's contemplated a few more sports, but those are that's the way that some of these other cities are kind of defining peak. So we have a lot of different users in our facilities, and with that, I'd like to open up the discussion into whether we should look at having peak defined for each sport, and what your thoughts would be in terms of what would peak mean for your particular sport.
So with that, again, Glen Hinton, Coastal Academy, would that be for multipurpose fields? I guess going into the context of how would this apply? I mean, certain fields, I mean, does that mean you mix in stuff into baseball, softball? Is it mixed into soccer, Mance Buchanan? Does that become open for football? I mean, what's the context and how we would define season of sport and where it would be applied through the parks?
Right. So it would be in respect to our multi-purpose fields where, for example, soccer competes with lacrosse, football. I mean, not here in Oceanside in terms of lacrosse, but football certainly, rugby, and any other sport that would require a multi-purpose field. So the idea would be what is defined as the peak for that sport, and that sport having priority for allocation during that peak period, opening up access to other non-peak sports during that, or to other sports during non-peak times, if that makes sense. But obviously, I mean, it would be pretty much for multi-purpose fields, and it would be for courts, because our gyms, double for volleyball and basketball. So that's kind of where we would be ascribing value to priority.
Frank Zimmerman from Oceanside Breakers. It's my understanding that we've been operating with that peak situation as long as I can remember. We do have defined peak use, football, soccer in the fall, baseball, softball in the spring. So I'm not sure. I just want to answer correctly. Are we talking about, should we change that? Are we talking about, should we continue that? Am I wrong that we've been doing that, or?
I think informally we've been taking that into consideration. In other words, we don't permit a baseball field outfield during baseball season for flag football or something like that. But there isn't a formal concept of prioritization in the existing document. And so if that's the desire to continue to give priority to sports in their peak season, I think it's important that we formalize it in the new document.
I understand. I also think your staff could be constricted by that, because when you start making things formal, you have to live within those parameters. And I think what we have here, and there's a nice diversity sitting in this circle of different kind of users. So I think that is the one thing I will say, is we need to be careful not to put the staff that allocates those fields into a position. I think the biggest issue facing this group is not even allocation of fields, it's fields, period. It's gyms, period. And we don't have enough. So when you put yourself into some sort of box, or when you overuse parameters, it can be very difficult to problem solve. Believe me, I don't get much, not just in the city, but in the county. People don't want to hear when I talk about we don't have enough fields with that sports complex that everyone thinks we're using 22 fields on, and we're not, right? We're using 5, and we move them around. And the problem we have is that there's not an appropriate understanding of use to rest. I coach at Oceanside High, and I coach at Miracosta College, and they built a $14 million field for us. And they asked me if we wanted turf or grass, and I want grass because it rests 12 to 15 hours a day. And then it's used for 2 or 3, and then it goes dark. And to be honest, if you don't have a 1-to-6 use to rest ratio for fields, they will die. Gym space is really difficult, probably more than fields. And so I just want to be sure that everyone understands that there's some staffers that need some freedom within these loose parameters that we've been using, I think. Hope that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I think that our staff has done a great job in working with groups, and I appreciate the groups being amenable to working with one another. It's amazing to see here in Oceanside, one group reaching out to another and kind of initiating that conversation about needing some of their space. The difficult thing is that latitude that staff has currently also puts us in a position where staff is having to exercise discretion. So when the question about, decisions, why decisions are being made in a certain way, that puts staff in a difficult position to kind of defend why a decision is made in a certain way. So hence the need for some degree of formality. I think the ability to work with one another never, or that need never goes away. So I think as we add more and more groups and I think the growth of sports programs will outpace our ability to add more fields. I think we're going to have some degree of relief with the additional joint use fields and Parkside 1, but we're at a point right now where we're so far behind that these are just getting us closer to where we need to be. And so that coordination and collaboration is going to be critical no matter whether there's a formal document or not. It just puts us in a position where staff is not having to make those decisions indiscriminately.
That sheds a lot of light on it. Thanks.
Anyone else want to comment? Anybody from the audience? Come on up.
Arlene Hammerschmidt, resident. It's just a former coach as well, but it seems to me that the individuals who know best when their peak requirements are, or the peak season, or when it needs to be most consistently available to them, that's really an important piece that they represent. Like Glenn knows when the peak season is for his seasons, and Frank knows when it's really the best, the most needed requirement. You got to know where you're going to be, and there's got to be fewer variables towards, you all know that the best. So I don't know which city it was that allowed the user group to say, this is my peak period, but that's pretty innovative in my mind. My 2 cents worth. Thank you.
So I think it might be helpful for us to share what you consider your peak at this point. And Glenn, I know you represent a lot of different sports, so but they follow the high school season predominantly. But I know Coastal also has club use of amenities outside the context of high school, maybe not so much. Right.
Shall we go around the ring?
Sure. You want to start?
There we go. Melba Bishop Pickleball Association. We really don't have a peak season. It's pretty equal all way, all year long. Yeah.
Dmitry Demidov, Vice President of Tri-City Inline Hockey League. Our seasons correspond to the seasons that you mentioned. The City of Oceanside Parks and Rec Sports Department is currently exercising, and that is from January to June and from August to December. It is the facility of MLK Roller Hockey Rink that our organization has been using for most of the 31 years we've been in business, but the same facility is shared by Roller Derby Girls. I'm not sure what their season is. I think it's not the same. I think they start as early as January, but our season really starts from around March every year. Thank you.
Soccer Club of Oceanside, Oceanside Breakers, we currently operate a recreational season that we host January through May. And then if I had to say our primary season, nationwide soccer is a fall sport because of weather. And I think we would be placed as a primary season from early August, late July through December. But with that spring season, our numbers are just about equal on the rec side. And we do have a competitive component that's about a fourth to a third of our kids that can play straddling the high school season for olders 9 months of the year.
Matthew Berardini, Wolfpack softball. We're year round, so we don't have a peak season. I will say we have 8th grade and under and high school girls, and typically there would be maybe slightly less use during a peak season, which would help, but that's how we operate.
Okay, so unless anybody else wants to make comments, that's the intent of today's meeting. It was certainly a lot more brief than we had scheduled. Like I said, the start of the third meeting will be when we formally get your feedback for what we discussed. We'll be asking you essentially to affirm, from what I understand from this group, the 2 allocations per year works, with some consideration about seasons that extend beyond the end of that allocation period. And then the issue of peak priority being given during a peak season. So if you could give that some consideration and come prepared to give us kind of not only whether you would want us to prioritize based on peak, but what that peak would be, so that we could move towards a definition of peak. That would be the agenda for the beginning of meeting number 3. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. And Daniela, thank you for managing the PowerPoint. So unless there are any closing questions, have a great evening and try to stay dry.